Welcome to our podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a company that works with management consulting and boutique consulting firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Michael Sanders. Michael is the founder and CEO of Interactive Government Holdings, a company that works closely with Department of Defense and civilian agencies, distinguishing themselves by providing responsive leadership and customer-focused support. Ranked as Inc.'s fastest growing private companies in 2016, 2017 and 2018. Former Marine, Michael himself has received the Employer Support of the Guard Award and Reserve Patriotic Employer Award in 2016 and 2018. Michael, great to have you on the pod.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate the invite.
No worries at all. I'm really looking forward to having our conversation today. Today we're really going to talk about all things business. And as a founder and CEO of a business that I think you founded in 2006, you're someone with a lot of experience. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to dig deep into the insights you have. So to kick things off, I think the best place to start is really, could you give a brief background on your journey to where you are today and the current role you play within your business?
Sure. So IGH, Interactive Government, started in 2004 after President Bush signed an executive order allowing 3% of government spending to go to veteran-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned firms. It's executive order, I want to say 1230 or something, 1330 maybe, but either way, I was a veteran, and I did 3% of whatever the federal government budget was that year, and was like, that's a lot of money, And so I didn't know that there was companies and think tanks and organizations that had been working for 10, 12 years just to get that designation, in front of the president and get it signed off. So the veterans would have not necessarily a leg up, but an even playing field when it comes to the federal market. Generally, within the federal market, within the U.S., there's large businesses and small businesses, and once a business hits usually medium size is about when it gets acquired, usually by a large business, because it's eating up enough of their market share that it's easier just to buy them than to compete. Yeah, so I started the business thinking it was gonna, very quickly, take off very fast, and not really understanding the complete life cycle of from when something gets, an idea, or whenever something gets, from the appropriations committee to all the way down to a funding levels is a long journey. And as a small business, you kind of got to know, well, which tree to climb in order to kind of move fastest, because the common refrain in government contracting is, be a subcontractor first, go learn the business, and that's not really how it works, because a large businesses, and small businesses alike that have experience, they're not going to let you talk to their customer if you're a subcontractor. You're going to get a check, but you're not going to really get the experience of having to manage the customer, having to manage the employees, having processes by which the employees can, express HR needs or any needs whatsoever. Being a subcontractor is a good way to quickly, I would say, start getting revenue, but it's not necessarily the best way to start learning the business in its entirety.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned some really great points there, and I think I always like starting off with how you started, and I love the fact that you said that you'd entered it without the full picture, and I feel like entrepreneurship is a lot like that. You come in, you don't really know what you're getting yourself. You think it's going to be a fast growing period, and then it's like, oh, this is different, this is more. So it's really interesting to hear that, and obviously from where you started to where you are now, it's quite a testament, right?
Sure. And it's funny you say that, because the joke that we always have, because within the federal government, basically what happens is the government says, I have a need. I need 10 people to do this. I need a widget. I need a weapon. I need a there's somebody making millions of dollars selling tampons to the federal government. I mean, whatever it is, the government puts it out and says we need it, and then companies go and say, hey, I can provide it, right? And so, but the joke is what the government says they need, the proposal that you write, and what's actually happening on contract are typically three different things. And so, I had mentioned to you in our initial conversation that I always like to go and kick off contracts in person. And the reason I do that is because of those three different things. There's what the government says is happening and what they want. There's what you wrote, how you thought you could best give them what they want, and then there's the people that are on contract that are doing whatever they want if you don't have mechanisms in place for accountability. So yeah, so it's always, there's always that entrepreneurial gap between what what you think you know, and what you don't even know you don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that ignorance debt, right? You don't know what you don't know, so you can't be ready for it, right? And I think that's a really interesting point you mentioned there, in the fact that you mentioned it previously, but it's great for the listeners to know, is getting in there face first, and being able to have that conversation. How important is it for the conversations to be one-on-one, to be in person, especially when it's the type of offer you have in consulting and helping in that sense? Yeah.
Sure. Well, there's a few different times within federal government that it's important. And in government, we call RFP, request for proposals, right? And prior to that, they may do what they call a sources sought or a request for information. And during certain periods, you're allowed to call the customer. You can send them emails. But when something is out to where the whole industry can see it, they won't take your calls. They won't take your emails. Once some things are submitted, for instance, once like if you submit a request for information, right, you can't call them when that is when there's still before it's due, right? Like let's say it's due Tuesday at noon. Tuesday at 12:01, they can take your call and talk to you about it, but before then, because something is what we call out on the street, it creates or can create a conflict of interest. Getting to the customers, especially in federal, and that right sort of ebb and flow of life cycle, procurement cycle, is really important. I think what the large businesses do very well is because they plan out so far, they're able to get in there way early and start shaping things. And as you become a larger small business, it's sort of incumbent upon you to start doing the same thing, even though you may not have 50 people to go after a $500 million opportunity. You may have 5 people to go after, a $50 million one. And so it's just about getting into that ebb and flow of the life cycle. And I'm sure as a CEO too, people are trying to sell you stuff all the time, whether it's accounting software, whether it's, whatever it is. And I always think it's funny because I tell them, I'm like, if you're talking about accounting software, you're going to have to talk to a CFO. If you're going to talk to a CFO, there's a few times during the year when they're not. I mean, there's the end of the year, which they have to close out. They have to reconcile the entire year. Then there's the new year they have to plan for, which is budgetary, right? And they have to budget for the new year. And then they have to make sure that all your bank and everything is bank statements, and banks are reconciled, your financials are audited. So like the window to get a CFO to look at a new accounting system versus when they overly like is very, very small. And I always think it's funny when people call me, right prior to taxes being due or at the end of the year, and I'm kind of like,
Bit
you
late.
know, yeah, I'm like, I believe our accounting system licenses are up in August, so you may want to get her, April 16th, maybe right after taxes, but before, like that's usually her free area. So yeah, getting in front of the customer and knowing when to get in front of them I think, is critical.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think that speaks a lot about how you run your business, because this is what we say a lot to our clients and our partners. It's not just about getting in front of the customer, right? It's about the messaging you have with the customer, the timing of that, and understanding the language that they listen to. And I use this example all the time. If I go into, I don't know, solar sales, right, and they'll be talking about sales and marketing, but if I go into consulting, they'll be talking about business development. It's the language. It's everything about this business and these businesses. Understanding how you would approach is paramount to being able to have any success when it comes to being be put in front of a customer. I think following on from what you said there, network marketing plays a huge role, I imagine, in growing your business in terms of rubbing shoulders with the right people. How much of a role does it play when you're growing your consulting business, or are you fully reliant on it, or do you rely on other forms of business development?
So, it's a little different in the federal government, right? Because they're putting out, let's just say, what they need.
Yeah.
Needs documents, if you will. I mean, we call them requests for proposals, but they could be requests for quotes. I mean, they could be called various things. But let's just say for commercial, for the audience at large, they put out needs requirements, right? And so for us, it's about creating a pipeline of those needs requirements that sort of meet our core capabilities, that have the appropriate past performance, so we can say, hey, not only can we do this, we've done it before in these different states, right? We kicked off a contract 2 days ago where the government wanted to move some people into two states we were already doing business with the National Guard in those states. It was another National Guard contract, and a National Guard contract, if that makes sense. It was nationwide. And so, for them, they were like, oh, well, we're thinking about Florida. We're like, great, we have 7 people down there that do employment. We can help you down there. We're thinking about Wisconsin. Well, we have, resiliency trainers there. So, scale and scope definitely help you as you grow. And in terms of network marketing, it's a little bit different because it kind of goes back to that ebb and flow of what I was saying earlier. Because they're putting out their needs, in order to be proactive, you need to be able to go, okay, these are what they're saying they need. These are what they are saying their needs are. We have people on the ground who are saying that they're having trouble doing, this.
Hmm.
So the question is do you respond to what they say they need, and then if you want to get really proactive, you can do, a white paper or an unsolicited proposal, and go, hey, listen, we understand. Maybe you don't even mention the other thing, but you understand that they need this, but you go, wouldn't it be cool if you had this? Or wouldn't it be cool if, the services that you had this particular, widget on your phone that could enable you to, roll up after action reports to the program manager, without him having to do it manually. And so for us in the federal government, it becomes about looking for those opportunities of finding not only what they say they need, but, like we said, what they don't even know they may need.
And I absolutely love this part, and that this bit really interests me, Michael, in the sense that in being, I guess that it's the innovation side that really you're talking about, right? So they've obviously got a burning need that they need to be tended to, and you can go towards that need. But you're constantly looking for that innovation where you can go, no, this is what you will need at some stage. So let me be the person to bring it to you to be able to do that. And I think you just said there is an unsolicited proposal. How many of those unsolicited proposals have you done, and how successful were those?
You know, I don't have the numbers in front of me,
Yeah.
but I was telling my daughter the other day, we win much more than we lose in federal, right? I mean, some of the proposals we have, there may be 29, 30 bidders. Sometimes it's, if it's large enough that, the larger the dollar value, typically the number of bidders comes down because they're scared of this, that, or the other. I'm the opposite, but you know, so we've had some really good success, for instance, in positioning ourselves within an agency which we later got work from, even though it wasn't necessarily about that white paper. And I think part of that is because they know, like for instance, when I'm hiring, the one thing that I look for the most of is someone that asks really good questions. If they've done a little bit of research, like it doesn't take that. It's not that hard to go, do a Google search about, the company, who we are, what we've done, and then ask some intelligent questions about that and how that might, impact them. So, I think about it in the same way with customers, like, and I think about this in the same way too about conferences, right? Like I used to go to conferences and collect 300, however many bajillion business cards, right? And then I'd come back and try to remember what little chicken scratch I had written on the back. And when I changed it to, okay, I'm going to this conference because there's these 5 people that I want to meet. And I know I want to meet these 5. I want to meet Ron about this opportunity that's coming out in his agency next year. I want to meet Stacy because she was she's the program manager at the large business for an opportunity that I want to sub on next year. And then I have those five people. I have everything that I can find out about them without being a stalker, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. I have, the opportunity, why I want to talk to them, and then I have why I think, we're the solution for, that opportunity. And it becomes a very different, instead of going ROI on quantity, you're looking at ROI on quality. Me knowing, going to this guy knowing that, we went to the same executive program at Harvard Business School. Me knowing that, our kids play in the same volleyball, whatever. Like those are the little things, that tweak people's memory when you call them back later, and instead of someone that just was like, hey, give me contract, I'm this, I'm that. Contract, whatever. It becomes it's more like you're more like a sniper instead of a shotgun, a shotgun shooter. You want to have very specific targets that you know everything about or as much as you can possibly know about, and then you want to know why you want to talk to them. Why do they want to talk to you? And then what you can do to make their life better.
Yeah, no, I agree so much with a lot of what you said there. And one of the biggest things we preach is, especially in consulting, is there's two things that you really need to be focusing on when it comes to consulting is trust and relationships, right? That's what consulting is. You want to build the trust between whoever it is you're speaking with, but you also want to build that relationship, understanding who they are, what they can do, but what you can also offer to them, what value you bring. So it's a really interesting point to hear from you. In terms of then, and you touched on a little bit on how you approach recruiting. In terms of recruiting as a whole and running your organization and being a leader, and I know when we spoke initially, you talked about having a leadership team and being able to rely on that so that you can do other things, the high leverage strategic things. What role does this leadership play and good leadership play in running a successful consulting business?
You know, um, so I did touch on it a little bit, and I'll go back to just for people that weren't, because no one was on the last call. But I look at recruiting almost like courting, especially for A players. You're not going to find or get an A player easily. Especially if they're doing well where they're at. They may have deferred comp, or they may be getting vested somehow. So I always think of, I've gotten A players in as short as 2 months, but it's taken me as long as also, 3-4 years to get the person that I have as my executive vice president of operations and business development. Like he was at a very large business that does very well. I invited him out to a golf tournament that supports veterans that I sponsor every year. First year, it was like, no, love where I'm at, love what I'm doing. Second year, it was like, yeah, they, this, that, and the other. Third year, it was kind of like, well, hey, if you're getting ready to, before you start talking to people, talk to me, and he did, and it was great. But I also have a whole lessons learned deck about, a growth team that I hired sort of outside of our processes, and it became a big, like, it was essentially $1 million loss, because while they did they want a couple little things, and in the end, when I deconstructed it and found out what was good and what was bad and what was ugly about the whole thing, my lessons learned was, you know, I had negotiation fatigue. I'd been negotiating with three of them for multiple weeks over multiple things. They're A players, so they want to know details. They wanted to make sure that if their dog died, they could get time off, whatever. That's an example. But, and so this time, I went through my processes, which we're ISO certified. So we certify that all our processes are the same, no matter who it is or what they're doing. Staying within what we had already built and knew worked. And, was sort of the lessons learned for the growth team that didn't work out. With the new person, he was willing to come in for what he was making and prove himself. To me that was sort of a shock, because I'd been, talking to all these BD, business development people, and they automatically want, 175, 200, 250 out of the box when they haven't won or done a thing. And you're like, well, if you're so good, there's $1 trillion market here. But yeah, putting him in place, getting my CFO, which took 6 or 8 weeks of meetings, and we did a lot of different. I wouldn't say they were exercises because that sounds like we're kids at with crowns at the table, but we went through a lot of like what ifs. Like she was coming from a company with, I think, maybe 400 or 500 people, about $60 million in revenue. We were much smaller then. I think we were, $4 or $5 million in revenue. So there was going to be a lot of things she was going without. She had a whole department. Now she was gonna be the department. So that's kind of that was. But since everybody's been in place, it's been very easy for me to, like you said, work on the business, not in the business. They have issues. They come to me usually with a solution. And like I said, it almost made me feel bad at first because I was like, no one calls me when there's problems anymore. And then I was kind of like, wow, like no one calls me when there's problems anymore, unless there's, a serious one. They can't, they don't want to make a, they don't want to make a decision without me because of the consequence. So that's a good place to be, just in terms of, like I said, being able to think high level and strategically about your business as opposed to being in the minutia of the everyday stuff.
I think, again, it's really interesting to hear, especially the way you've approached building that team of those who you can rely on. You've gone to some of the biggest organizations around, or really large organizations, and taken some of the top people there. And as you said there, she had her own department. Now she was going to be the department. That's a really, I think that's a great line, because that's a realistic description of what small business is, right? And that is it. Like, you have a lot of handcuffs where you have to do, but you figure it out, and it's messy, it's not clean, but you get things done. So my next question was really in terms of your growth over the last 20 years or so. How was it at the start, and where you are now? How have you evolved over the years? What is it that you've seen in your team that has changed, that has grown, what that has allowed you to be more strategic in how you operate?
So federal is nice because there's not the churn, right? Generally within commercial, it's transactional. Maybe there's a year contract, maybe it's 6 months, 90 days, based on some of our vendors. Whereas within federal, it takes you a while to get that contract. Within that contract, maybe 5 years. So the contract we kicked off yesterday, gives us revenue out to 2030.
Yeah.
So like that, in that way, you start to have a backlog of work that is out each year, and as you win more of 5 year contracts, that backlog gets bigger per year, and it gets further out. So in that regard, it's nice. It's hard to get started, but once you have momentum and trajectory, it's a little easier to not be so stressed because you're not worried about necessarily getting the right, like, we used to always, one of the things that I did when I had won a large contract was I hired a lot of different like 1099 writers to start working on stuff because I was like, we need writers, we need more writers. I wasted a lot of money, because it was like I didn't do our first part of the process, which was qualify the opportunity, ensure that we were capable of doing it, make sure that there was the X, Y, and Z. I was so excited to go bid, like I didn't take the first part seriously, in terms of qualifying the opportunity and making sure that we could actually put in a compliant proposal. Um, so, anyways, I think I ADHD'd your question, but
Yeah, it was more how you started off and the growth and how you got to where you are now.
yeah, so it takes longer. So I was on the right track. Sorry, I just
Yeah,
forgot the end.
no worries.
So it does take longer to get started, and then once you get started, right, it's about sort of amplifying your weaknesses, or I'm sorry, amplifying your strengths, mitigating your weaknesses, right? So for me, I knew that the thing that I hated most of all, was payroll, HR, those types. Not that I minded interviewing and hiring people. I love doing that, but the paperwork, all the stuff that goes along with W-2, and then as you get certain points in terms of the number of employees, the Department of Labor has certain restrictions in terms of what you have to do, what you have to provide. And so we kind of went from like one employee three employees, five, seven, three, and then in 2015, we won a $50 million contract, which put us at like 120 employees. And so we had to learn to scale very quickly. And that's, I think I mentioned I went to an executive program at Harvard Business School to kind of learn how to be a professional CEO because I had really no idea. So once we got up over 100 employees, it became more of like you're the chief of a village almost. You're going to have everything that you will in a village. I mean, we've had replaced a lot of hips, a lot of shoulders, in terms of surgeries. We've had babies, we've had deaths. We've had people missing because of hurricanes. We've had, the whole gamut. So, and then again, having the executive team that's reporting to you about what's going on allows you to sort of be able to step in and call those people and be there for people when they need you, when you have a good executive team that's keeping you informed. But in terms of growth, that was a huge catalyst. And when we won that $50 million contract, I thought, oh, well, the next one will surely be $100 million. Just did not work that way. But growth kind of ebb and flowed. We hit the only year we haven't grown was I want to say is 2019, and it was the year after we lost the recompete for that large contract. We had a low year, and then we've been growing back over ever since. And I think with the contract we just started, that'll put us about 270 employees. Or no, I'm sorry, 170 employees.
Wow, wow, and that's really quite. From what you said to me, you had employees what 1, 5, 7, 12, and it's almost overnight with a contract being won. You've gone from that to 120 employees that need to be employed, right? You've got $50 million coming in. Obviously, these didn't get hired overnight, but the ramp
Yeah, we
up
had
to
seven.
getting
We had 7 days.
yeah, exactly, outrageous. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
and I mean the thing is that some of them were on contract. I mentioned during our
Yeah,
pre-interview that
yeah.
within federal we do badge flipping. A lot of times
Mm.
someone may be already on that contract for a long time. However, a lot of times the government may not like all the people on those contracts, and so they may say like, we love Tom and Stacy, but we really don't like Mike. He's kind of a jerk. Maybe wink wink. Because they're not allowed to tell you really who to hire and who not to hire, but they can certainly tell you who they don't particularly care to work with. So
And that, yeah, that could have a knock-on effect on any opportunities going forward as well, isn't it?
it does, yeah. I mean, you want them to be happy, but you also have to comply with regulations. So there's always a fine line in terms of like, well, this is what the government said. This is what we can do. And hopefully, you meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, no, finding the middle ground is that sweet spot, right? So, in terms of those years as the CEO of a $50 million company, talk to me about that. How was that running a company of that size, especially from your
I
experiences
mean that.
previously?
I mean that was so that $50 million doesn't come in all at once, right? It's like over
Yeah.
5 years or whatever.
Oh
So I
yeah.
mean it's. I mean now our backlog's bigger,
Mm.
and it provides I guess ease of mind a little bit, just in terms of knowing that I can go to a bank and go, hey, listen, I have this huge backlog of government contracts. Like that's how I was able to buy the house I was in. Just do different things. I mean, it gives you some I don't know gravitas. I don't know. Banks like to see it, especially banks that know government procurement. It's helped us out of a bind a couple of times, just in terms of we have when you bring on a bunch of people, your payroll may jump from 300,000 to 350,000, and if you haven't billed right, or you have we've had customers that were 6 months late, that owed us well into the six figures, and that's just has to do with the balancing act of of everything that goes on with the day to day running a business. But just in terms of running a business, it's, it's generally a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of strains and a lot of stresses, and when things come up, you have to deal with them. But if you're the type of person, I mean, like I've never really enjoyed having a boss. So so for me, the alternative was to start a company. I didn't probably I knew probably way less about it when I started than I should. But I guess That's why they say, ignorance is bliss, or the youth is wasted on the young. Whatever you wanna try. But I was able to get it started and keep it going and have some success, and it feels good to be able to employ people across the country and know that they're getting good competitive wages and benefits, and that I'm taking care of them and their family. So that's always a good feeling. And when I call around, I always ask people how they're doing, not what they're doing. I think that's important. I have managers and ops people and stuff that tell me what they're doing. So I just like to know how they're doing and make sure there's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that we can't do as a company that would help set them up for success
Yeah.
in a
No,
better way.
I think that's a really interesting point. Primarily because I feel like running your own business, and this is from a personal point from myself as well. It's one of the most challenging but rewarding things you could do. Right? You're constantly growing. You're bringing on team members. You're having to leave your ego at the door, right? And you're having to try and push through and help others, lift others up, and try and go in. You're essentially pushing up a massive boulder up a hill every single day, and the more people you have with you, the easier it becomes. But then you find that the boulder becomes bigger, and so you need more people. So it's a consistent thing, and it reminds me of the quote: "If you're not growing, you're dying." Right? And
Sure.
and you have to continuously evolve with the time. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and then you also have to deal with the Pareto distribution too. 20% of your people are probably doing 80% of your work.
Yeah,
And are you part of that 20%?
yeah,
It's interesting, but as we've gotten bigger, I always think about my, like, from the perspective, like, if I'm calling an executive or I'm calling somebody about something, like, am I going to be throwing off something that they're doing for me in another way, that's productive, just because I want to call and say hello and know how their new English, their new puppy is, or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
And part of that, I've been reading, like, slow productivity and some other stuff, just in terms of managing workflow and energy, ensuring that my people have the resources, including the time off, and the the cognitive time off to bring their best self, when they are needed, because we're not always writing a proposal, although we'd like to be most of the time. Uh, we like second week in February, we're all heading down to Miami to do an offsite. We'll do our planning for the year. We'll do our budgeting. We'll look at last year, see where we met, and take a look at some of those numbers that you talked about. How many RFIs did we send out? How many did we win? How many did we lose? Are there any common themes in the debriefs that we got for losses or wins? And so that's always, I think, a good thing to do. Even if you're just one or two people and you just go to a coffee shop, I think just starting to have an offsite and to do a strategic plan, even if you're, like, when I was a single person and I did my strategic plan for the year, it was like, get more money, like, bid more RFPs, like, it was like three things, and I went to a like, coffee shop with one of my board of advisor people, also a good friend I'd done jujitsu with for many years, and was just like, this is my plan. What do you think? And he's like, well, this isn't really a plan. Like, he just started, like, kind of writing all over it. But over the years, it's become a living document, and now I can look back at it, for the last 2 years, and put those numbers together and go, okay, well, last year we put out 20 bids, we won four, and the contract value of 25 million, whatever. What did we do? 24. What did we do in 25, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes a living document, and it becomes a thing which you can turn to and go, like, yeah, we did do that, or we said we were going to do this and we didn't do it. Why didn't we do it? So those are all important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Michael, so this section of the podcast, what we like to do is we call it the entrepreneur's room, right? So we like to ask the same questions to all of our guests, and just to get an understanding of how entrepreneurs think and business owners think on a consistent basis. So the first question we like to ask in this section is, how are you currently spending your days as the leader of your business?
The last year, our themes were acquire, automate, and grow. So for the last year, what I was doing while my team was busting out proposals and doing all their stuff, I was jacking around with AI tools Chat GPT. I mean, there's a ton out there. I mean, whatever I tried, I would read anything I could on them, see what, if any, benefit they would have to my crew. And my CFO was adamantly against it. She said, "No, it's not GAAP, it's not DCA compliant. Like, I'm not letting any algorithm touch my books." So whereas my business development people were less skeptical. So what I did was I had to go through a lot of different platforms, got a lot of different demos. They were very sketch on everything. So I finally found a particular platform that was just for government contractors. It was built by government contractors, so they spoke our language. They knew about all the different things. So finally got that done. The growth we got through organic wins, and a lot of what I spend my day doing is either a lot of questions come to me now as solutions, like, "Hey Mike, this happened over here, we met with so and so, we talked to the customer, they're happy, blah blah blah." Like, they hand me the solution. If it comes to me as a problem, then I know it's usually it's something that I need to deal with immediately. So but a lot of it is spending time making sure that we're moving towards our goals for the year, in terms of meeting with Laura, meeting with our CFO, and saying, "Okay, where did we end up for the month? What was our net? Where did we want to be? How close we are." And to give you an example how good she is, usually we're within 1% of our budget for the year of what she planned for. So that's usually a good sign.
Yeah, 100%. That's a good sign, and always interesting to hear that. The next question I like to ask here is, as a business owner, as a leader, and as someone that now works more on the business rather than in the business, what are the most important metrics that you review, that you look at for your business at this moment in time? And you touched on it maybe earlier, that you're going to Miami and you might be looking at how many RFQs we win, lose. But what are the most important ones that you look at?
Yeah, I mean, for metrics, I see top line growth, bottom line
Mm.
growth. I'm looking at all the time. I'm looking at the size of our pipeline, when they might come out, who the customer is. It's really easy because the government, there's a website where you can literally go on and just be like, whatever, and you could literally put billions and billions of dollars in your pipeline of stuff that may never come out. You're not qualified for. I mean, and I've had business development people do that. They flood the pipeline with stuff to make it look full.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look, the pipeline's over $1 billion. Okay, well, let's start whittling down. Okay, well, we don't do nuclear waste removal, so let's just cut out that billion. We don't do, we're not going to remove mines in Iraq, so we'll just cut out that $100 million. And so in terms of what I do, it's mostly market facing. Like, when I'm doing stuff, whether I'm either putting out an article or a podcast, or I'm doing panels or keynotes, typically it's market facing.
Mm.
And the result that it has is that people want to do business with us,
Mm.
or and it also turns into a lot of mentoring, market facing stuff to kind of show that the company is, we're looking at artificial intelligence. We're looking at what the best practices are within our field. We're looking at, all our people are taken care of because, we've been Department of Labor Platinum Award winners for like 5 years for hiring veterans, a certain number of veterans per year. So that's a metric I look at, just because it's important to us. But a lot of it's just financial and other, not KPIs necessarily, but we have goals at the beginning of the year that we plan for. And so throughout the year, I'm just kind of making sure we're checking them off, or we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. No, yeah, it makes a lot of sense as well. I think it's so important to consistently be making sure you know what's going on throughout the year, rather than waiting till the end of the year and going, "Oh, have we hit targets?" or end of the quarter, things like that. In
Yeah.
terms of, I guess you've been in business for a long time, right? And you've been about around the block. You know the trials and tribulations that come with it. What are some of the biggest things that didn't work for you? What are the biggest lessons that you could give to us? And obviously, I'm sure there's a list longer than what we can say. So maybe the top two that you can think of, the biggest lessons.
I would just say, like, when a baby's learning to walk, right? Like, you would never get frustrated with it and be like, "Oh, this baby's just not going to walk." And I think in the same tone with the business, if it's something that you believe in, if there's a need, if there's a customer set. I think you just have to believe in yourself and know that eventually you're going to walk one day, and that you do whatever you need to do until that time. Before, we had won even a subcontract. Like I was a caterer at the Kennedy Center. I mean, at the Kennedy Center. I dug ditches. Done pretty much anything, in terms of other jobs that I could do, while I was, trying to grow this business as well. And if it's something that you're passionate about, if it's a product, a service that is going to meet, a definitive need and help the world, there really shouldn't be anything that stops you.
I love that. I love that. I like to end every single podcast with the same question. We ask all our guests this, and the question is, if you had a magic wand to solve one business problem, what would that be?
I mean, I guess the sinister answer is I would just wipe out all my competitors off the earth. But I guess the politically correct answer is I don't know, water for all the kids. I don't know. Last mile delivery problems. I don't know, but no. It's interesting because when I was looking at buying a company, I asked the guy what gave him the most joy in his business and what kept him up at night. It's kind of very similar. I love being in business. I love having employees. Sometimes, being in business is stressful, but anything worth having, is going to be. So, I think if you're pursuing something that, not necessarily you're passionate about, I hate that because, I'm not passionate about getting up at, 4 in the morning and working out in the morning, but I do it because it's required. Some of business is you do it because you're passionate about it, but there's a lot of parts of it you're going to just have to do because it's required until you found somebody that's better at you than doing it. For me as a CFO, when she got in there, she told me about all the money I left on the table, all these places, by not billing right. I would just encourage to keep going. There's a book called Think Like a Rocket Scientist. There's a great quote at the beginning of that book, if you haven't read it, but it just talks about starting to walk, even when you can't see what's in front of you. Eventually you learn to walk in the dark. And anyways, it's a great quote. It's a great book. Helps you think about a little bit outside the box in terms of business. But, if you're doing something you love, keep doing it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think like a rocket scientist. That's on my list now.
I'll send you.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. As you can see, I do love a good read every now and again.
Yeah, I'll show you my, next time we connect, I'll show you all my library too.
I'm sure it's pretty impressive. Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and it's been a great conversation. I think we've shared some really great insights, and yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I really appreciate you sharing your time today and giving the value you managed to give today.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Said. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right then. Bye now.